So I've been watching the way that the Republican Party and Donald Trump have responded to the last few weeks, the insanity of Joe Biden dropping out and Kamala Harris being crowned his successor. It's been a crazy few weeks, and I think the Republican Party expected to be able to deal with her quite easily. I think they expected to keep their normal line of attack. I think the Republicans were quite united in continuing to attack her in the same way that they were attacking Joe Biden before. And Trump was very confident. I think he was much too complacent about Harris. And it means they don't actually seem to have an effective attack line right now at this point. They seem a bit taken aback that their attacks aren't landing properly, aren't really connecting with the voters or the audience or people, just undecided voters, independents. You can see that Trump is flailing a little bit, trying to find some way of landing a punch. And he can't quite triangulate Kamala Harris in the way that he wants to. Now that might change. You'd expect it to change if they're any good at this. And they are good at this because it's the one thing that Republicans are good at, is attacking their opponents and dragging their name through the mud and linking them to every form of fear that a human voter can have. So I expect them to get better at this between now and the election. But at the moment, they don't seem to really know quite how to deal with her, with Kamala. After 4 years of telling the world that she did absolutely nothing in the administration and she was just hired because she was female and black, they're now telling everyone that Kamala was Kaiser Soze all along and she's been in charge the entire time. She's been in charge of Joe Biden's term from the very start. Everything you didn't like from the last 4 years, that was her. That's what they're saying. That angle of attack doesn't seem to be persuading people that much. I don't quite know why, but it just doesn't seem to be landing. They also tried looking at her very distant past in San Francisco. So now they're painting her as some kind of very bad SimCity player who created San Francisco from scratch, pushed the hookers and drugs slider too far, built all the schools next to the heroin clinics. They might as well have just photoshopped her into an old photo of San Francisco from the 60s and said, look, she was right there when they started doing all the gay stuff. That angle of attack doesn't seem to be working that well either. People just aren't buying it. They've been sold this stuff so many times in the past. And what happens is, it's the same with the Tory party in my country, the Conservative Party. They did exactly the same thing for 14 years against the Labour Party. And it worked. It worked for 14 years until it stopped working. They pushed the negativity about the Labour Party. They said the Labour Party is going to turn this country into a communist dystopia. It's going to bring back bread lines. It's just going to crush industry. They did that for 14 years and it worked. So it can work. And it does work. It's the one go-to tactic of conservative parties across the world, to double down on the negativity and drag the enemies through the mud, make you fear them. But when it stops working, and I think it has stopped working for the GOP in the last few weeks, even just the last week, you can tell when it stops working. You can feel it. Something in the air. People just glaze over at the constant negativity. It gets wearing to hear someone who's meant to represent your country describe that country in such negative terms all the time. And Trump has been pushing this tactic since he came along. We know it. We all know it. We in the UK know it. We know the shape it takes. We know which points he's going to hit each time. We know the people he's going to attack. We know the exact way in which he's going to attack those people. And we know it's going to be doom and gloom all the way through. There's going to be a couple of jokes left in, but it's going to be pretty horrible, pretty negative, pretty grim. And as we have seen in the UK in the last couple of months, this kind of negative, vote for us or your country's going to burn shtick, that has a shelf life. You can't just keep pushing it forever. It had a certain weight to it when Biden was in charge because it seemed like there really wasn't a functioning guy in charge with Biden. I mean, he's a lovely, great guy, but he is in a bad way by now. So the apocalyptic negativity from Trump worked pretty well with him. Not because he was bad, it's the opposite. Biden's term seems to have been enormously successful by almost all metrics. So it wasn't because of anything particularly bad about the last 4 years. It was just that there didn't seem to be anybody really functioning in charge at the wheel, in the White House, in the Oval Office, at the top. And Trump was able to glom onto that and insert all the negative apocalyptic visions he wanted without any real pushback, because he couldn't really push back. He wasn't in a good state to push back on these attack lines. But now that Kamala, now that Kamala is an alternative, I think Trump needs to pivot, and he needs to pivot in a way I don't think he's actually capable of doing. He needs to find a way to deal with Kamala Harris that people don't immediately glaze over when they hear him talk about it. He needs to find a way to actually make a case for himself and for the Republican Party rather than against his opponent, and he's very, very bad at that. Because, as I've said with the Tories in my country, if you keep pushing this message that the other party is pure evil, and you keep doing it, and you never change that message, regardless of who they put up to run against you, people just stop believing you. They just stop believing you. And I think that time might actually have come for Donald Trump and the Republican Party. I don't think their line of attack right now is working. And I have a kind of comparison with, it's ironic that this video has him talking to a very highly religious audience at the Turning Point convention, because there's something religious about his argument that the opponents are so awful, so terrible, that you can do anything is justified to avoid the fate of being ruled by these people. And he pushes the awfulness of all his enemies and opponents so far that you stop believing him. You stop believing a word he says, because his descriptions of what's going to happen if the other guy gets in charge or the other party gets in power, his descriptions are so over the top that you can't believe them anymore. And I always thought about hell, the biblical hell, when I was a kid. Now, there's different interpretations of the biblical hell. There's very literal ones, and there's more metaphorical ones. But I was always told about the very literal biblical hell, which is, you burn forever. You're in permanent, constant agony, the maximum kind of agony you can possibly have, forever. And it always seemed just so over the top that it didn't need to be that bad to convince me not to do bad things. It didn't have to be anywhere near that bad. You could put me in a maximum state of pain for you can do this. We can do this with people. You can put people in a maximum state of pain for about 5 seconds, and they're willing to do absolutely anything you ask. So extending that maximum state of pain to infinity, it was just never necessary. And people twig. People just don't. It's a sign that you don't really have confidence in what you're proposing. If you have to make the alternative so bad, so absurdly, improbably bad. And I think it was a lack of confidence in Christianity that really encouraged pastors to make hell as vivid and literal as possible to put people off. And they really threw the kitchen sink in there. So I don't think hell was even in the Bible at first. I think it was brought in much later. It wasn't in the Old Testament, I don't think. And it was brought in later, and they really pushed the boat out with it. And I don't know about you, but I found it a little bit hard to believe. And I think the Republicans and Trump and the way he describes what the country's going to be like if Kamala Harris gets in charge, they have a little bit of that same quality. They're just pushing it a bit too hard. They're going a bit too over the top. They're saying she's going to bring in radical left Marxist judges who are going to turn every country in every state in the country into San Francisco. They're going to turn every city into San Francisco, every house into San Francisco. It's just going to be San Francisco. They're going to rename it San Francisco States. And I don't believe it. And I think quite a few people don't believe it too. I don't think it's hitting home. I just think the same attack message, the same attack line that they've been using for the last 8 years, isn't going to work this time. So we'll see if they actually change up their attack. I'll be interested to see. I'll be interested to see how they deal with this new threat from Kamala Harris. That's my 2 cents on the subject. Leave some comments and leave a like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Cheers. Bye.